Hello everyone! Welcome back to my channel. I hope y'all are doing well. So we are going back to a favorite segment of not mine about going over the symbolism within the media, mostly movies and TV shows. And every once in a while there may be some video game reference, but most of it's going to be focused on movies and TV shows. In this case, I'm going to focus on a Netflix film that just came out. So The Sea Beast is a very interesting film that is made by the people who did Big Hero 6 and Moana, and you can see some of the influences in this film. So the story focuses on White Rock and this big old ocean world where it's filled with sea monsters everywhere you go. And there are these group called monster hunters who have to go out into sea practically every day, I believe, where they have to go and slaughter the beasts that plague the seas and destroying whatever ships that stand in their way, thus resulting in a very dangerous occupation. One of the most famous beasts that this current ship, known as the Inevitable, have to chase after. Our main characters are Maisie and Jacob, two very different individuals who love monster hunting but find themselves in a very interesting situation after encountering the most notorious monster in existence, the Red Blaster, and thus find themselves interacting with this mysterious sea creature and what could be found within it. So for this video, I'm going to focus on the Sea Beast film and some of the hidden contexts are found within the story. And without further ado, let's begin. So to kick this off, we have Red, or Red Bluster is its actual name. So, Red was a very interesting creature. It was considered very hostile at the beginning of the film, ready to attack any ship, including the Inevitable, and willing to sink the crew with it. But then, a weird thing happened in terms of her behavior. Red began to analyze and spare both Maisie and Jacob, intrigued by the both of them, and trying to learn and understand the strange humans that entered her life and her seas. I felt like in some ways it represented Jacob, or Red in this case, as in terms that these two have a physical embodiment of a certain hatred for each other, as well Red has a hatred for humans, while Jacob has an understandable hatred towards the monster. After all, Jacob's been hunting monsters all his life, while Red has been battling the hunters throughout her life, getting scars in the hide, which in a lot of ways kind of shows that the color red itself can sometimes mean war, anger, but in some cases it can represent passion too. Oh god, not that kind of passion! I mean the other kind of passion. Thank you. So Red has this kind of sense of passion in her when she grows more attached to both Maisie and Jacob. It wasn't easy, but in time she soon begins to learn more and more about humans in general, and she definitely shows that she's more intelligent than they give her credit for. She understands things that not many humans would even pay attention to. And in a lot of ways, again, this would represent Jacob. At first, he also came off as this hostile monster who's closed off and want nothing to do with people, or at least really communicate them outside of the whole monster hunting business. But after spending some time with Maisie, he begins to connect and open up with others in a way that was never imaginable, and thus having a life outside of monster hunting. Blue is practically another ambassador for the sea creature world, for you see, he is practically a baby and is very introduced as cute and lovable, giving us a breather from some of the scary nightmare fuel that Maisie has endured in the past, or at least witnessed in books. When she gets introduced to him and tries to offer him food, he takes it without harming her, just only giving a slobber to her hand, just showing how friendly this creature really is. And here's something that I want to talk about blue in general. For you see, the color of blue represents a sense of calm and serenity. It is also considered a very heavenly color, as you would see it always being used for the sky and the sea in general, which in a lot of ways definitely represents blue as a whole. Blue is a very calm and chilled out sea creature that observes Maisie and sees her as a great friend and a playful companion. Another thing to mention here is that blue resembles that of an anglerfish, practically having a tiny light on top of his head. Now, it would be something akin to that of a lantern, and lanterns are usually known to represent illumination, being that light at the end of a tunnel, practically illuminating something. Which, if you pay attention to the scene where Jacob was reading a book, it definitely was illuminating the dark secrets behind the stories that the royals have given. I feel like blue also represents Maisie, as well as red represents Jacob. In terms of personality, despite of how reckless Maisie can be, she's the calmest one of the two, practically trying to get on an even level with Red and trying to use a more calmer approach without having to hurt or harm anyone. As well as when she told off the royals, she did not explode. So yeah, books are always considered one of the most valued pieces you'd see in fantasy or any sort of genre. Usually it's to help people learn about something, what's considered very important, and it's exhibited a lot in this film. As the saying goes, knowledge is power, and the more people know of this specific kind of knowledge, the more likely that person's able to gain more advantage in life. And in a lot of ways, this was appropriate for what is going on here. There was basically a lot of stories that told about the monarch, a monster hunting ship, the monsters that reside in the sea and supposedly attacked people, which brought a lot of fear and caution throughout the residents of White Rock and throughout this seafaring empire. However, when you get close towards the tail end of the film, you'll learn that this sort of knowledge was corrupted, tainted by the royals, the king and queen of the land, just for other things that I'm going to explain further in this film. But what the point I'm getting at here is that books and the knowledge itself can be corrupted if it fell into the wrong hands. Oh joy, I actually get the chance to talk about these two. When you get to see this delightful pair, you... well, take it away, Greg! Yeah, you kind of figured in this point, they're not my most favorite characters in this film. And for some of you who watched this, understand why. Because the monarchs are really horrible people after all the things they've done. Even they had a tendency of looking down on the sea hunters, as well as the peasants, the very people that are supposed to be looked after by the royalty and get nothing in return. So, Captain Crow was even disrespected so much that he practically drove himself crazy in trying to take down the Red Bluster, even went as far as calling out the royals about their wealth and not failing to do taking on down Red. Even Maisie called them out on their selfishness more than once. Here are some of the things that were foreshadowed. So, for example, the purple crab. Why I felt like was a symbol, mostly because the color purple is always associated with loyalty, and the crab is usually symbolized as prosperity in some cultures, while its sideways stepping is considered dishonesty in certain cultures, which is why I felt like it would have been very appropriate to represent of how the royals are very cowardly, if not very dishonest. And here's another sea creature that seemed pretty appropriate. Enter the starfish. The starfish represents regeneration, healing, creativity, balance, but the starfish that the queen had on her didn't represent that. It was more of a gaudy false facade that kind of represented of how their kingdom was nothing more than a cesspool of hatred and fear. And the only way that any healing was going to happen was when the sea beast was defeated. And then there's the scallop shells that the king wears, and scallops are usually representing some sacred pilgrimage, which is something that the hunters always viewed their job as, a sacred pilgrimage of trying to bring down the monsters that are supposedly terrifying the whole land. Then there's the colorations of the clothing, green being one of them. Usually green represents growth and adaptation, as well as in some cases generosity that blooms forth and brings fresh renewal. However, the flip side of these colors, or this color in general, is practically jealousy or envy if some of you want to be a bit more specific about it. And of course, the most infamous topic, greed, which in a lot of ways represents what these royals have been doing with most of the hunting of the monsters. Even Maisie realized that their selfishness was causing a lot of innocent lives. The royals didn't care about their expansion at the expense of other people's life. They just wanted gold and whatever they could get their greedy hands on in terms of trade. And finally, to add things all up, there's the color white, not to be confused with white diamond. Anyway, white can represent the color of purity and innocence, which is sometimes you would see in certain drawings that represent innocent, fluffy days. Then, of course, it represents cowardice. And then there's also, in some cultures, a representation of death in terms of white. And, of course, there's gold. Gold is usually considered a sentiment of success, wealth, which is again representing the royals as a whole throughout this entire ensemble, just representing their greed, their cowardice, as well as just their capacity for corruption. Remember what I said earlier about how knowledge was corrupted? When Maisie learned the truth about what had been going on with the monster hunting, it was by then it got the idea of just how corrupted their government system is. Not only in terms of their government, but also they were corrupting the values of the sea hunters, practically belittling them for holding up to their code, as well as the sense of generosity they truly had, which again just makes them very horrible people. And so these are just my thoughts, and I'd like to hear yours. What you think this film symbolizes, let me know in the comments below. Do a like, subscribe. This is Dragon Deals, signing off.